going on, RotoGrinders? Dean here. It's Dean 7904. If you want to get all technical on me, it is 10 o'clock on the East Coast, 7 o'clock on the West Coast. And of course, that means it's time for RotoWorld Pick 6. It's presented by RotoGrinders. And yes, do not adjust your internet television. I'm Dean 7904. Crane, unfortunately, is not here. So I'm going to fill in as best possible. Full disclosure, he asked me to fill in for him 20 minutes ago. I do my research on a Wednesday night. It's Wednesday night when we're recording this. I have not started my research. Thankfully, two of the absolute best in the business will be giving you all the analysis necessary. Leading off, it's Rich Rebar. Of course, you know him from the worksheet over there at RotoWorld. Rich, how are things treating you this evening?
Dean, it's good to talk to you again. We did this once last year with you, so it's great to have you back. Here we are, man, week 14. Hopefully we've got some, people who unfortunately had their regular seasons of redraft, end unfortunately, and they're trying to come in and play some DFS. Hopefully not for the first time, but if it is, we're here to chop up some games and some plays, for the week, might get them started here. And it's a great time, if you are trying to get into DFS. I'm sure most people following the show obviously have already, been playing forever and doing stuff. But if there happens to be some new players out there, man, it's not overly daunting. It can be what you make it. You don't have to be, scared and, think that you're just going to get, your money taken. You can make the games whatever you want. And that's why it's pretty special.
They're beginning leagues too if you're just starting. So yeah, just dip your toes in. Don't dive in fully. Don't go ahead and hit for the Millie Maker just yet. Also, let's bring in no introduction necessary, but the GOATs, Evan Silva. Of course, you know him from his matchups column over there at RotoWorld. Evan, how are things treating you this evening?
What's up, Dean? I'm doing pretty well, man. Just had to block like 30 Titans fans on Twitter.
Uh-oh.
But
What's going on? What did you say? What did you say about the Titans?
No, I just said that the Titans stink, because they do. And Titans fans don't like to hear that. They don't like to hear that.
A little reality check.
Yeah, they treat the NFL like it's college football, like you have some sort of resume. Oh, we beat the Seahawks in week 2. First of all, you didn't beat the Seahawks. The Titans beat the Seahawks, and it's not a resume sport. They don't have an efficient rushing offense. Their passing offense is pretty much pathetic. Their pass defense is pathetic, and their run defense. I think their run defense is better than DVOA gives it credit for. But in DVOA, they're 18th in run defense DVOA. So they have no strengths as a team. So they do have a good record, And I liked them before the season. I bet on the over for their win total, and I'm going to make money off of them. But I think that they stink as a team. But let's move on with the show.
If you really want to get under their skin, tell them that the Music City Miracle, that was a forward lateral. It's a forward lateral. Shouldn't have counted. All right. So, yeah, the first game, of course, we focus on 3 games here, and then we kind of branch out from there. Silva, the first game I saw was Green Bay, Cleveland. And, again, I just saw this 20 minutes ago, just aware of it. I'm like, Green Bay, Cleveland. Oh, yeah, it's Josh Gordon week, right, Evan? Like, how do we not play this dude? That's why you guys want to talk about him, right?
Yes. I think that he comes back for 11 targets, looks great, looks great on the field. Kaiser missed him for, some chunk yardage gains. But he was winning against Casey Hayward. Casey Hayward, who is Pro Football Focus #1 overall cornerback on the year, has been shadowing number ones all season, has been, routinely shutting them down. He said that Josh Gordon was the toughest matchup that he's faced all season long. He jumped right back in, played 76% of the snaps, dominated targets, dominated air yards. At his price, I think he's still underpriced, for his talent level and for his opportunity. I know that Reeves is on Deshaun Kaiser, and I really want to like Deshaun Kaiser. Deshaun Kaiser has actually been good in fantasy in 3 of his last 5 starts. He's been a top 13 fantasy quarterback in 3 of his last 5 starts. The games where he was not, he was, way toward the bottom of the weekly ranking. So he's definitely got a low floor. But I know that Reeves loves Deshaun Kaiser, and I want to be talked into him.
All right, Reeves. Well, before you talk about Kaiser, talk about Gordon, because he's 5'5" on DK and 6'7" on FanDuel. That seems really, really fair.
Well, like Evan talked about, I mean, he flashed, no pun intended, a lot of that upside and why he was such a coveted fantasy player, back when he was, fully playing, in 2013 and then in 2014, that size speed combination, man, where, just effortless. He reminds me, like when he runs, he reminds me a little bit like Julio Jones. He's a big guy. I mean, he's running faster than everyone, but you don't really realize it because of how big he is. He had that 39-yard catch in the second half where he's just bullying people and running away from him. I mean, that's the types of plays that, he provides. Then you have that play, the 28-yard pass on the sideline where he gets, goes over the top of Casey Hayward. So, I mean, you take that in a tough matchup, and if you're going to get that type of usage and roll it over. Now, I do think Corey Coleman's going to have more than 4 targets in this game, and it's a matchup that sets up for Corey Coleman to have more than 4 targets. But, I mean, he had 34.4% of team targets, Josh Gordon, that is. That was the 3rd highest rate of all wide receivers last week. He was targeted on 38% of his routes, which was number 1 in the week last week for all wide receivers. So, I mean, we're going to now take that type of usage, and if it rolls over, he's going to get a much favorable matchup at home against a Packers defense that's 31st in fantasy points allowed per target to opposing wide receivers. They've allowed 13 top 20 scoring wide receivers. That's the 2nd most on the year outside of Tampa Bay. I mean, it just all sets up for when you look at his price tag and the type of volume he got and then the matchup. I mean, it just all lines up. He's going to be heavily owned, but I mean, that doesn't mean you run away from him. I mean, he's just a square you plug in, probably, 65% of the field or upwards in cash is going to have him, but that's okay. I mean, you take those and because you don't want to miss out on that ceiling, man, when the much of him. In tournaments, it's a little different. I think you can pivot to Corey Coleman. I mean, there's a 0-point floor there, but in tournaments, I mean, the upside. So the matchup's good. And Corey Coleman's a guy that had rapport with Deshaun Kaiser dating back to the preseason and those 3 games prior to when Josh Gordon, came back and he came off of, IR. He was getting targets, had a good game against Jacksonville, had a good game against Cincinnati that could have been better if he squeezed the 29-yard touchdown. So, I mean, there's still upside there in Corey Coleman. It's just that, obviously he's off the cash game radar because he showed he had a 0-point floor. Evan wants me to talk him into Kaiser and,
yeah, me and Evan right now. Me and Evan right now. Let's see if we're going to buy Kaiser or not. Sell it to us.
I mean, he's just so cheap, man. 64 on FanDuel, 49 on DK. Like Evan hit on, like he was a good play. I played him pretty heavily in tournaments 2 weeks ago against Cincinnati because he's hitting these spots and he's getting a ton of rushing production. He's averaging 5.5 rushing points per game. That's second, among all quarterbacks that are playing behind Cam Newton. Deshaun Watson had more than him, but he's inactive now. So, I mean, you're already basically starting with like 5 points, and the turnovers don't hurt you as much in, on the DFS sites than they do in the season leagues. Those full 2-point turnovers don't hurt you. So if he has a couple turnovers, he's not really sinking you either. And like Evan said, he's been a QB1 in 3 of his past 5 games. He wasn't against Jacksonville and he wasn't against the Chargers, 2 of the toughest matchups. We weren't on him those weeks anyways. But this week sets up really great. I mean, the Packers are allowing the most passing points allowed per attempt in the NFL. They're a team that can elevate his low passing floor enough to where you can take that rushing floor and combine it and, have a safe floor given his cost. I mean, I don't see any way he doesn't really, double up cost on FanDuel and triple up cost on DK. And that's what we're looking for out of a floor quarterback. And he's got the upside for a lot more. And if we're on Gordon, I mean, you have to be on Kaiser a little bit, just in sense of if he's going to get that ceiling, I mean, Kaiser's going to do something. So you've got to play the premier wide receiver player everyone wants to play given cost. And, his quarterback has to be in the mix as well. So, I mean, I'm looking at him and what he can do, roster freeing for my lineups, and he frees up a lot. I mean, I'm more into him on the Thursday through Monday slate because there's a couple more guys in the primetime games I want to play that cost more than there is in the main slate because, we don't have Le'Veon Bell in the main slate. We don't have any of the Saints running backs in the main slate. So, I mean, those are guys I want to get into lineups because those are guys that have been carrying us to cash every week. So, I mean, I want to get those guys in my lineups, and Kaiser's one of the guys that can unlock that. So I mean, I'm in on Kaiser this week from like a fantasy perspective. He can have a pretty weak game, in terms of real life football and still have a pretty good fantasy game.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the issues that I've had, forcing him in, and I want to be sold on him. If I was going to root for a college team, it would be Notre Dame. He was Josh Norris's number 1 rated quarterback coming out this year, which, looks silly right now, I'm sure, but Josh Norris has been very good at this, over the years. He has a great physical skill set. I mean, if he were to somehow, the light were to flip on for him a little bit, he would be a monster upside dude, in fantasy and real life, et cetera. You mentioned how the matchup is really, really good, and he's been better in fantasy than people have thought recently. And right now, we've talked about Josh Gordon. His weapons are nasty right now. You mentioned Corey Coleman. I mean, Corey Coleman is a former he was a number 10 or 11 pick in the draft. David Njoku is a freak show, and his usage is up over the last 2 weeks. 59% and 54% of the snaps. That's his first and third most playing time of the season. He's got 10 targets in those 2 games, has turned him into 121 yards, over 15 yards per reception, and a touchdown. He's a guy that, and the Packers have been good against tight ends, but they haven't been as good recently. The Steelers tight ends, 12. Bucks tight ends got him last week. Cameron Brate had a couple of touchdowns. O.J. Howard had a big play against him. So, the weapons really for Deshaun Kaiser are mouth-watering. And, the matchup is really, really good. The issue that I have had with him, though, is that there's so much value, especially on FanDuel, where you can play Steven Anderson at the min, where you can play Giovanni Bernard at 5,100. I mean, Giovanni Bernard at 5,100 on FanDuel is hard for me to get away from. On DraftKings at 3,100, he's just stupid, but on FanDuel even, I think at 5,100, that's really, really hard to get away from. So those are the issues that I'm having is like, I want to pick the right value. That's something that I've learned playing NBA DFS a lot, is that I want to play the right value plays. And I don't know if Deshaun Kaiser beyond tournaments is the right value play. I'm going to play him in tournaments for sure. I'm just still like kind of on the fence in cash, but you make some very good arguments.
What about in tournaments? Go ahead, Rich. I'm sorry.
I mean, you look at just the past 6 games against the Packers. I mean, they're getting the only person not to deliver against them was Joe Flacco. I mean, they gave up 16 points to Mitchell Trubisky with no rushing production. I mean, it's Kaiser's a guy that he can get you. If you're telling me I can get double-digit passing points from Kaiser, then like he's gonna smash.
How about the running backs? Would you consider? Okay, this is what I was going to ask. You want to be contrarian. Everybody's going to have Gordon. Everybody loves Gordon. Playing Kaiser with like Coleman, or Kaiser with Coleman and Duke, is that completely nuts, Rich?
No, I don't think it's nuts. I mean, Duke's a little tough. I mean, that first game back, he just had 12 yards last week, and it was a team that had been getting kind of torched through the passing game by running backs. They're not torched, but given game script and where they struggled defensively, running backs had been doing a lot of damage to them. So I mean, it's a little tougher to like go in on Duke, and he's more of like a floor guy anyways. And he's never really priced cheap enough to where you can really squeeze on him. I think Coleman's a fun like a good direct pivot. Obviously, I mean, if you look at the Packers, they've allowed multiple receivers to do this to them in the same game as well. It hasn't just been like they give up rushing yard or passing yards because one guy does damage to him. It's been multiple guys. So I mean, like I said, you might have a spot where he hits. I mean, you can play him naked if you want. You can do a lot. I mean, it's just there's probably no one else outside of Coleman and Gordon though, and Njoku that I'm really going to touch here though for tournaments. I mean, Crowell's been fine. He's you couldn't ask for a game that has potentially as good a game script to keep him involved. But I mean, he's still another one of those guys that, I mean, Kaiser's in the way of Crowell though. I mean, because he's not a guy that's going to catch passes. Kaiser leads the Browns in rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line. He's actually tied for the league lead in touchdowns inside the 5-yard line with Mark Ingram. So I mean, it's tough to play like Crowell and Duke.
Silva, what about the Green Bay side?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of people wound up playing Brett Hundley last week. Brett Hundley is just, I mean, I'm at the point where I just don't think that he's very good. So he's been decent in 2 of his 6 starts so far, just in fantasy. One of them, he was the quarterback 12 on the week. He ran for a touchdown. And the other one, he was a quarterback 7. That was that Sunday nighter against the Steelers. I guess people wanted to chase that. And, like all of his passes that he completed in that game were behind the line of scrimmage, and people just blew it. But the Steelers just blew it, like defensively. So I don't think he's very good. I mean, I think you could even use the Browns defense this week. I mean, they're super, super cheap. They're at the bottom of the bucket. I would be willing to stream them in season long. Hundley is just, I think he's a train wreck, and then with the RB situation, So Aaron Jones deserves more work. Jamal Williams has been good, though, in this workhorse role. It's just I think that, his arrow is going to start to teeter down because Aaron Jones is just more talented than him. And I think Jamal Williams probably still going to get like 14 to 17 touches. But I don't think we can count on, the 20 that he's been getting every week because Aaron Jones deserves more work. And then, Davante Adams is just so tied to Brett Hundley, who is not a good passer, and that is a major issue for me. And he's going to be stuck on Jason McCourty this week, who Jason McCourty, by the way, got owned by Keenan Allen last week. But he's been a good number one corner for the majority of the season. And then no one else has been viable. I mean, Randall Cobb had a goose last week. He didn't have a target last week. Jordy Nelson I don't think he's gone over 35 yards in any of Hundley's 6 starts. So it's not a great, situation for any of the Packers unless you think that Hundley's going to have one of these crazy outlier games. He did run a lot last week, and that actually had not been running in his previous 2 or 3 games. If he runs, he can do some damage in the box score, but I think he stinks right now.
Evan, Jordy's so tied to Rodgers. He probably can't wait for Rodgers to come back. Like, if he's this same price, 4.5K, come week 16 or so, like, is this a thing of, like, Jordy just, accumulation of age and year, injuries and all that? Is he just as bad, or is it just bad chemistry with Hundley? Or are we just going to be salivating when he's 4,500 with Rodgers?
It's just such an on-field rapport thing. I don't think he's a bum by any means. No, it's just, we need Aaron Rodgers back. If we get Aaron Rodgers back, I think they play Carolina next week, I want to say. Mm-hmm. Carolina's been getting smashed by wideouts recently. So if we can get Rodgers back next week when he's eligible, I think Jordy, boom, immediately comes back into play. And maybe we could get him at a very depressed cost if the sites don't adjust him up just because Jordy comes back or because Rodgers will be back.
Yeah, I mean, look at held. I mean, Jordy, to me, I mean, it's completely narrative, just eye in the sky, but he's the best boundary receiver I can remember since Chris Carter. Aaron Rodgers hits him on so many, like, just balls on the sideline where it's all body control. And then you take on how touchdown dependent Jordy Nelson was. And when you compromise that with a lesser entity in Brett Hundley, I mean, it just all fell apart because Jordy, even with Aaron Rodgers, wasn't posting high yardage. He was still living on touchdowns. And when you take those away, I mean, like I said, it just cratered. He said fewer than 35 yards in all the starts. He led the team in targets last week, but still didn't even matter because, Hundley's just not a guy that can get him the ball where in the areas where Rodgers was getting him the football. And, it's hard to latch on those receivers, like you said, because they're not really putting the ball in Hundley's hands either. One of the things I talked about with Davante Adams, I liked Davante Adams a lot last week, the matchup, his target share, all lined up, and he got off to a hot start, but because they controlled the game for the most part or were in the game, they are not their target pies are not large. They've had 26 or fewer targets available as a team in 4 of 6 starts that Brett Hundley's made. I mean, that's not a lot to latch onto, even when we're talking about like high target shares that Davante Adams had, the 27 to 30%. Still, I mean, that's not a ton when you're talking about split of 25, 26 targets. So, I mean, it's tough to latch onto. I think I like Jamal Williams a little more than Evan just because the Packers have kind of shown that they're not willing to just give guys back their jobs at the running back position, and they haven't really been too interested in running a committee so far. So, I mean, I think that they're going to keep riding this as long as it's working. But I agree that Aaron Jones is probably a more talented player and deserves more opportunities. But I don't know if they're going to just go away from it because of the way Jamal Williams has played. And Jamal Williams has progressively gotten better over the past 4 weeks as well. So, I mean, the Browns have gotten a little leaky on run D. They still are underdogs in this game, since they lost Agba. We talked about this last week a little bit. And, Jamie Collins. So, I mean, I think there's some opportunity still for Jamal Williams for his price to squeeze if you're trying to run the stack back in a sense. Because, like I said, the Packers still are favorites this game.
And we can first game after this one, but I just wanted to with Jamal Williams, like he's the type of runner that he is. He's like a grinder, and I feel like the way that he runs like instills a warmness inside of like a coach's heart. And you know what I'm saying? Like
an old coach.
Right. He gets what's blocked and a little bit more than that, like that's McCarthy. And, doesn't put the ball on the ground, and so they feel good. He doesn't make mistakes. He went to BYU. He instills this one. But I want to get your guys' take. Who wins this football game?
Rich?
I'm going to say that the Browns win, man.
I'll take the points. I'm hedging. Give me the 2 or 3 points.
Yeah.
The 3 points, I guess it is. It is worth noting, by the way. Yeah, so Jones had 1 touch last week. I think it was in overtime, and he only got the touch because Williams just had a big play. He basically gave him a breather, and he took it to the house for a touchdown. And of course, he went into the game, with this question mark, like he had the knee injury, and is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Is he just dressing his emergency? I presume he'll be getting healthier as the week progresses. Stay tuned, I suppose, as far as news and notes out of the beat writers. But I would imagine, he does seem like the more talented guy. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about San Francisco, Houston. Rich, give us the overlay as far as this game.
Yeah, this game's kind of fun. I mean, this is the one, like me and Evan usually typically try to pick a game that I think that we think has a shot to go over. I think that this is a good one. I mean, given both these teams' defenses, how they're playing, and everyone's kind of priced a little cheaper outside of DeAndre Hopkins, who obviously we don't need to spend a lot of time on. He still had a really great floor even with the switch to Tom Savage. But I mean, obviously the 49er side is what becomes interesting. Jimmy Garoppolo took over last week. He looked really sharp. He threw for almost 300 yards on just 8 possessions. 49ers just had 8 possessions in that game, and he almost threw for 300 yards. I mean, I will say that it was he did so. The 49ers offensive line played way above their heads last week, and Pernell McPhee went out after 7 snaps in that game. But it was the second lowest pressure rate they gave up in a game all season. It was way far under the pressure rates they allowed to with C.J. Beathard and Brian Hoyer. Under center. So, I mean, Garoppolo took advantage of that. I mean, if you give a guy like that, a lot of clean space, I mean, he showed. And he worked the middle of the field, which I think what makes a guy like Trent Taylor interesting. Probably not from a DFS stance, but maybe, I think more in your deeper PPR leagues, he's an interesting guy. Because Garoppolo last year, he was a guy that worked the middle of the field in his starts in New England. 51.3% of his passes last year were over the middle. 49% of his throws last week were over the middle of the field. So, I mean, a guy like Trent Taylor becomes pretty interesting. Obviously, everyone's going to look at Marquise Goodwin. He had his highest target share of the season since Pierre Garçon was lost for the year. So, I mean, you had a guy that has big splash play upside like Marquise Goodwin does, the guy that can drop an 80-yard hammer on you, on just having a few targets. And we're going to give this guy now 8 to 10 targets, and he's going to get more efficient targets. I mean, that really gets you going. We're talking about safety net, a floor. If you give a guy like that a floor, we know the upside's way, way up there. So I mean, he's really exciting. Against the Houston team that has just been bludgeoned in the passing game. I'm more on the weapons than I am Garoppolo, just because I still think that there's some touchdown, upside here that I think is still kind of fleeting. I don't think Garoppolo's a guy that's really going to throw 3 or 4 touchdowns in a game, because I don't think the 49ers are really ready to take that jump yet. But I really, obviously Marquise Goodwin is probably the premier play from the 49er side. And, I'll probably have a lot of them. I'm assuming Evan's going to as well.
Evan?
Yeah, I mean, what stood out to me, well, first of all, Garoppolo was excellent. I mean, I didn't expect him to play that well in his first game at Soldier Field. Now he's going to Houston, where they have a retractable roof. He could very well be indoors. He probably will. For Marquise Goodwin, so it was very impressive to me that he had a productive game without having a big play, because we hadn't seen him have a big play or have a good game without having a big play the entire season up until last week. And all of a sudden, he's catching a lot of stuff in the short and intermediate areas, and Garoppolo is treating him like his number one. And that was very promising to me because we know that big play is in Marquise Goodwin's toolbox. And we also know that the Texans have given up the most 40-plus yard receptions in the NFL, and I believe the 10th most 20-plus yard receptions in the NFL. I mean, they got Jonathan Joseph out there. He's an old dude, can't really run anymore. They lost AJ Bouye last offseason. I mean, they lost a lot of their pass rushers. They're very vulnerable in a deep passing game. And that's really still Goodwin's bread and butter. So he's a real hot play. Trent Taylor does make sense in PPR. And I'm with Reeves on the Garoppolo thing. It's just kind of hard to envision him suddenly having a 3 or 4 touchdown game, because the 49ers don't really have touchdown scoring pass catchers right now. You know, George Kittle might have been that, but he's definitely not that guy anymore. I mean, he's playing less than Garrett Selleck at this point. You know, he's like 35% of the snaps last 2 weeks. So I think it's Garoppolo and Goodwin, and then, you know, a little bit of interest in Trent Taylor.
What about so you referenced them already as far as the tight ends. Fedorowicz went on IR. He's out for the season. And I was watching the game last week, and I happened to punt some lineups with Fedorowicz to kind of open things up. And, like, to the tight end, Steven Anderson, like, wrong tight end. And, like, not only that, like, he was concussed at some point as well. But he was forcing it in on Anderson, too. But he had 12 targets. And, like, sometimes he was double covered. Rich, I guess, 3.2K on DK. Is this our tight end du jour as far as the punt this week?
Yeah, I think if you're looking to punt, he played a lot of receiver split out too, and that's who he is. I mean, he's a 6'2", 230-pound guy. You know, kind of one of those tweener guys. He was a guy I picked up in a ton of dynasty leagues because I was interested in the athletic profile. I mean, I had him graded as I do like my own like in-house Spark score, and he was the second. He had the second highest, like basically my version of the Spark score from that draft class. So I mean, I was in on him, and I liked the spot. This is when I thought Fedorowicz was just like a blocking tight end only. It was before last year. I was like, oh, he landed in the right spot. Fedorowicz will be the blocker. He'll be able to just line up, in like this H-back type role that Bob has used before. And it's Steven Anderson's gonna be that dude. And it hasn't paid off at all. But I mean, I actually am alive in a dynasty league that I have him, so I'm gonna play him this week. I'm really excited about it. But like Evan. He's a guy that I think we're looking at from like a punt standpoint. I mean, he had 12 targets. Some of it did come in like a jailbreak. Tom Savage threw for 160 yards in the fourth quarter last week because they were chasing points. But I mean, 12 targets. Bruce Ellington went on IR. They really don't have a wide receiver too, although Will Fuller looks like he might suit up in this game. But the 49ers had a lot of touchdown in 5 straight games to a tight end before last week, and that's only because the Bears just haven't used any tight ends. They don't have any guys that's going to siphon targets in their offense. So I mean, if this game is going to pop, I mean, Steven Anderson is going to be one of those guys, and where you can just come in and take the punt, and hopefully get yourself 7 to 10 targets, which I think are achievable. Because I mean, but neither passing game is really going to get slowed down here. It's just going to be up to what Tom Savage can do. The only thing that's going to stop the Texans passing game is their quarterback.
Yeah, did you watch Savage trying to throw the fade last week to Hopkins? It's just so just keep it in bounds and give him a chance. It's so depressing, but Hopkins is just so good. I feel bad for him. He doesn't have a quarterback there. What about the ground game? Evan, Lamar Miller feels like a young Frank Gore in training. Like he's going to be around for the next 7 years. Nobody's ever going to want to play him. And I don't know. I never feel good. It's never a fun button to click as far as Lamar Miller. Are we considering clicking it this week?
I mean, I think that there are some interesting things about him. I mean, the 49ers, they've been below average in run defense. They haven't been the run defense that they were last year. Over their last 6 games, 4.43 yards per carry allowed to running back. So, that's definitely not good. It's not terrible, but they're definitely below average. So it's a solid matchup. Texans are at home, fine shot to win this game, maybe even control the game. If Garoppolo just doesn't play as well as he did last week in another road environment. Lamar Miller, 26, 18, and 19 touches over his last 3 games. Now the Texans have insisted on, using other backs, and even if it's Alfred Blue, who's like one of the least efficient runners in the league, because they just don't see Lamar Miller, I think, as a 30-touch guy, but he's been getting solid work. I think that he's like season-long league, he'd be like a fringe RB1, RB2 on that usage. Now, he has been used a lot in the passing game. He's got 3 catches in 5 of his last 7 games, and the 49ers have given up the most receiving yards in the NFL to running back. So I think that there are things to like about Lamar Miller. I've considered, I've made some early week lineups, and I've considered putting him in a couple. I'm with you. He's like, I never get excited to play him, so I'll end up, juggling my lineup in other spots to not have to play him, But I mean, he's been on my radar a little bit. With Steven Anderson, I wanted to add, so the Texans receiver core is so banged up right now. I mean, Bruce Ellington just went on IR. He was their slot receiver. He was playing like 70-80% of the snaps, so that's removed. Broxton Miller had been getting a bunch of work too. He actually had career high, I think 71 yards last week. He's in the concussion protocol. I would guess that he's not going to play. He's had concussions before. So Steven Anderson is not only locked in as the starting tight end. Will Fuller is questionable this week, although it sounds like they're somewhat optimistic that he will play. I mean, they were using Andre Ellington as a wide receiver last week, a guy who they picked up off the street like 2 weeks ago. And Steven Anderson was getting, slot snaps as a slot receiver as well. So they're just really shorthanded at receiver. I think that DeAndre Hopkins, he was a guy that he had a touchdown pulled off the board real early last week. And I knew because I think I put him in like every lineup, and I knew I could just feel like, this day is not going to be a great day when you lose that early touchdown. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the matchup is real good for him. He's running 83% of his routes outside. The 49ers, their two outside corners are right cornerback Dante Johnson. He's number 111 out of 116 in Pro Football Focus's cornerback coverage grades. And then their other cornerback is Akello Witherspoon. I remember watching this dude. I'll watch a bunch of cornerbacks like coming out of the draft. And what stuck out to me about Akello Witherspoon was how soft he was.
He tackled nobody.
No, he is contact averse. And
he's got that Deion Sanders disease.
It's worse than that. I mean, it's bad. Like he's big and he's long and he's fast. Mm-hmm. But he's like a dude that I think DeAndre Hopkins could just torment. So I'm trying to go back to DeAndre Hopkins as much as I can. I'm just like everybody else. I'm like, I get recency bias and I'm like, oh, that dude screwed me last week. You know what I mean? But I want to play a lot of DeAndre Hopkins.
He makes a lot of sense.
He was fine last week. He just didn't get in the end zone, basically. And if that touchdown counted, he'd been fine. And I was hoping he'd get to the bonus, but he had 14 targets. And, look, he's still going to get a pile of targets once again. I can't imagine who else. Well, let's ask this question. Let's say Fuller is cleared to go and he's good to go. There's no issue. So he could justify that roster spot in just one play real quick. And he's really, really cheap, too. 4.3K on DK. Any interest in tournaments from either of you guys?
I mean, I'm not gonna shade anyone's deep dart. I mean, but he had a premium matchup against a team that had been getting torched vertically and still is, against the Indianapolis Colts, and there was just no connection there. I mean, Savage just couldn't connect with him at all. I just don't think Savage is the type of player. If you watch Hopkins, I mean, Hopkins is he's working hard, man, on those targets. They're all boundary catches. They are all the toe drag swags. They're all just he reminds me, he's like Street Fighter E-Honda out there. Like, he's just chopping dudes down. He's just chopping dudes down. Like, there are dudes on him. That Ravens game, his jersey's ripped. His jersey's shredded. Like, dudes are just all over him, and he's working so hard on these targets. I mean, I just don't think that Savage is the type of quarterback that he might hit one prayer ball to Fuller, and that's if you want to chase it, but not a guy I'm really going to pursue, especially in his first game back after an injury.
I was more of a Chun Li.
Akello Witherspoon is not going to want to cover anybody with a ripped jersey. Akello Witherspoon, his jersey is pristine. He does not want to get dirty.
All right, anything else in this game? Y'all are going to move on and talk about the Raiders and the Chiefs.
No, I think we're good.
All right, Raiders and Chiefs. It is 47.5 is the over-under. The Chiefs are 4-point favorites here. And hey, if you guys, stacked Alex Smith and Tyreek Hill,
the Millie Maker went full stack here,
and Travis Kelce, y'all won all the money, and the King of the Beach as well. I think that was the winner as well too. Myself, before the week started, I'm like, oh, Kareem Hunt, we're done. We're breaking up. That's it. I wrote off the email. I wrote up the tweet. I DM'd him. I lost his number, and then Sharkandic West, I'm not going to play. So in a Godfather 3 style, once I thought I was out, they pulled me right back in. And I fell for it again there, Rich. Oh, man, I'm so bitter at Kareem Hunt. We're still chasing these 3 ridiculous plays from the first weeks of the seasons. So let's talk about
Dean,
the
you
Chiefs.
didn't listen to the show last week because Crane tried to sell me and Evan on Kareem Hunt, and we shot him down.
Oh, it's funny. I talk about my research. My research is part of my research is this show. Now I'm on the show. And again, I'm just asking the questions. Don't listen to my analysis this week. But tell me about Kareem Hunt. Are we done? Are we officially breaking up? Is this the real, true breakup or what? The matchup.
I don't know. I think that this week, I think there's a story to tell yourself. I mean, before last week, he had totally missed out on like 2 great matchups. So, I mean, I'm not going to jump all the way in. I don't think you can just ignore that. I mean, he's lost the splash plays. And like we talked about with Crane last week, I mean, they don't get in the red zone. And you look at last week, they popped again, but what'd they do? All home run balls. Again, it's not like they're sustaining drives. A lot of people are probably going to give Matt Nagy a lot of credit, but I mean, they just hit on their home run balls. I mean, everyone's going to forget that Matt Nagy called the 3rd and 1 pass to an offensive tackle, down 3 points with, 15 minutes to go in that game. But, we're going to say he rejuvenated. They just hit their splash plays, man. That's the kind of offense they've been all year. The first 6 weeks of the season, they were hitting all those home runs and their offense looked electric. And then they went dormant for, 4 weeks. It's a tough way to live, and 30 and 40-yard touchdowns. They're the only team in the league that has more touchdowns scored outside the red zone than inside the red zone this season in the NFL. League average is 71% of your offensive touchdowns coming from the red zone. They have more from outside it. That's who they've been this year. So I mean, they hit on those plays. I'm a little nervous here. I think the spot is just as good if you break it down, because the Raiders defense is just horribly bad. I mean, they the last 2 weeks they've been okay, but against Paxton Lynch and Geno Smith, like not ready to anoint their defense, turning the corner, because previously they had allowed 5 straight QB1 games. They're 30th on the year in passing points allowed per game. So I mean, I'm still back on Alex, and obviously Kelsey. Hunt's a little tough to say. I mean, the matchups there, if you want to take on the main slate, like you said, all the main slate's fun this week because all the guys we've just been leaning on are off the board. Both Saints running backs are gone. Le'Veon's gone. Gurley's still out there. We kind of had this conversation last week, and the answer was right in front of our faces. We're like, well, who are we going to play, on the main slate? Gurley's just out there. It's like, oh, yeah, we're just going to ignore the dude that's, just churned out RB1 games the whole season. And, obviously he popped. So, I mean, Hunt's a little tricky for me. I will say, though, that, too, this game being in Arrowhead's a little weird. And typically when division games, like when we have one of these games that just go nuts and nuclear like the first game did, usually when teams do that again later in the year in division, like the games tend to be kind of like a letdown. They tend not to have as high scoring, types of output. And when we get to like the Raiders side, like the Raiders have a pretty poor history in Arrowhead, especially with Derek Carr. But I mean, it's gonna be hard to like completely push off them because this Chiefs defense is really, really bad right now.
Ed, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the Chiefs defense is bad, and they just suspended their top cornerback, Marcus Peters, who hasn't been very good recently himself, but he's still their best cornerback. And that means that they're going to be relying on all these scrubs that we have been picking on. We're going to see a lot of Darrelle Revis this week probably. We're going to see Phillip Gaines. We're going to see Terrence Mitchell. And we're going to see a lot of Steven Nelson. And those are dudes who have made a lot of people money in daily fantasy over the last couple of years. But I'm with Rich. Over their last 11 games at Arrowhead, the Chiefs have given up 20 or fewer points in all 11. Their shootouts happen on the road. That's where Josh McCown rips them up. That's where Derek Carr, who's been terrible in fantasy all year, rips up the Chiefs. I don't know if this game is going to be a shootout, even though it looks like it could be on paper. I don't know about this Raiders offense. Derek Carr just has been a tentative check down machine all season. We don't really know if Amari Cooper is going to play yet. I don't even know if he would be an asset if he is in there. I think he might have like a high ankle sprain. I mean, he's not practicing. He missed last week. He's got a significant ankle injury. So who even knows if he would be effective? If he does not play, Crabtree jumps into an amazing spot against the Chiefs to where you could, theoretically game stack this with Alex Smith and Kelsey again, or Tyreek. But I think that Alex Smith and Kelsey looks maybe like the best on paper, and then bring it back with Crabtree against these terrible, terrible Chiefs cornerbacks. And the Raiders have leaned more on Marshawn Lynch recently. He's got 19 and 29 touches over his last 2 games. On the first drive last week, he ripped a 50-yard touchdown. He pulled up like a little gimpy at the end of the run, missed a few plays, but then came back in. And he was beast mode pretty much the rest of the way. Didn't rip any huge plays, but he was out there breaking tackles. He looked good in the passing game. They've used him more in the passing game recently. You definitely like to see that. So I like specific plays in this game. I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical that it's going to be like a big time shootout, but I think that there is a good amount of fantasy goodness in it.
Yeah, like you said, the 750 yards combined amongst the quarterbacks. And is that a thing that, like they said, the second game as far as in-division rivals, Rich, it's like generally speaking the scores are lower. I guess the stats show that. You would know that more than me. I suppose that's a thing. Can you speak on that? And is that something you think that might happen this game?
I mean, I don't have specifics in front of me now. I actually think Jonathan Bales was the first one to do something on this. I mean, I might be wrong on that, but I think that he was first that, highlighted it, that teams tended to go under when they rematched. I mean, that's obviously not something that's 100%. It's just, you're playing probability. I think that in Vegas here doesn't really like the Raiders side as well. And it could be just because the injuries they had, or like, because Evan said, it's Crabtree and Lynch. If, Amari doesn't go, then it's a gaggle of other guys. Johnny Holton started at left wide receiver. Last week he played the most snaps. He did score. He's got some home run ability. It'd be an area of the field where we like to target. If you want to just really deep dive, Seth Roberts plays in the slot. These guys aren't exciting. I mean, if you're going to say that Amari Cooper's going to miss and you like this game, you want to stack it. Those are odds and ends, misfit toys that you can say. I do like Lynch. We've been talking about it all year. Lynch is still good at football. He was. They just weren't giving him the ball. And if Cooper's going to miss, I think it sets up for a game where they're going to keep giving him the ball. He's been a top 10 fantasy play 3 of his past 4 games. Still a little touchdown dependent, but like Evan said, he's getting work in the passing game. Like I said, I thought he had been playing well all year, just wasn't getting the touches. And now that they finally realized that because they had to out of necessity give him touches, that maybe our offense should be a little more balanced. And that's also why Carr can't hit a ceiling either. So he's interesting. Being on the road and as a dog though, he's just not super exciting to me as a cash game play or anything like that. I am interested in Hill though, because I think people are going to look at the home road splits and maybe run away from Tyreek a little bit. Just 38 yards per game at home this year. He's been really down, but he's just a mismatch for the secondary. Even at home last year when these two teams played, he got him for a long touchdown. He's just, the Oakland secondary is just really no answer for him. Obviously there's a low floor when you have a player like Hill involved, but he's had a safe floor the past month. He's had 12 or more PPR points now in 4 straight games. So it's not like you're just getting hung out to dry. But he's really given the Oakland problem too, especially the past 2 games they played. 12 catches, 191 yards, 2 touchdowns, not even counting the special teams juice that he put up in those games. I like him in a game that, probably people will look at those home road splits and maybe not want to play him.
I feel like the Raiders are kind of like rope-a-doping with Lynch. They were playing the long game, just they didn't want to burn him out early. He's an old man. They were thinking for the playoffs, they'd have him as fresh as possible, but they've really needed him of late. So that's why
I think they just overrated their offense. I think they thought their offense was a lot better than what it was, because the end of last year, they were not as good as what the record indicated. And, a lot of people had them pegged for regression candidate, and it's hit. I think that they thought that they were going to be this air raid team based on the personnel they had, but they have a big offensive line, and you sign a guy like Marshawn Lynch, they should have went the inverse of what they did early in the season.
Yeah, Dean, you're giving this coaching staff way too much credit.
Well, I thought the NFL coaches are really sharp. John Fox is the next one to go, right? Well, you're a Chicago guy, so he's got to go, right?
Oh man, he should have been gone a long time ago. What an atrocity! Kicking field goals at the half yard line. Are you kidding me, man? His explanation last week for why he didn't let the 49ers score a touchdown late in the game, which they absolutely should have, and they could have. Bears maybe could have rallied back and tied it. If they would have let them score. Oh, we had a lot of faith in our special teams to block the field goal.
Because that happens all the time.
Right. A 0.8% chance to block a field goal over the last 10 years.
Coaches should be forced to play 100 games of Madden first before they become official NFL coaches to understand things like time situations and all that. But all right, enough of that. Those 3 games are out. Let's talk about our bounce backs, Rich. Who's bouncing back this week?
Evan kind of hit on this a little earlier in the show. I thought he might blow the spot up, man. I kind of like Adam Thielen this week. Adam Thielen has started to lose a little bit of his safety valve role though. His past 5 games, his usage in the slot has gone down 51% to 48 to 46 to 43, down to 37% as Jarius Wright's taken over as the true wide receiver 3 there. But he kind of hit on it. They started to use James Bradbury in kind of the shadowing role. and it really hasn't worked out that great. Bradbury's a fine player, but he's been a little bit outclassed, here the past few weeks. The Jaguars have gotten smashed by lead wide receivers. And I mean, we can debate whether you think Thielen or Diggs is their lead wide receiver. I'm going to say it's Thielen. They've allowed 17 or more points to the opposing wide receiver 1 in 4 straight games. Progressively leaky. Thielen had like a down week last week. In a game we chased a lot of wide receiver production from. I was chasing it from Stephon Diggs a lot. I went like full like Sunday morning and like I'm gonna get so much Diggs in. So
I was told Bleeding Ray Wilson. That's all you need to know. And like, Diggs caught the first pass of the game.
Well, Bleeding Ray, did he even play?
Yeah, he started at left cornerback and he was awesome.
Yeah,
he played great.
Unreal.
He played great. So. Hey man, his entire career he's terrible, and all of a sudden he shows up and plays awesome. And they also had DeMonte KZ, rookie 5th round pick at slot corner, and he played great too. So I mean,
yeah, they got us, man.
They just plug and played and they balled. So
they've been a good pass defense all year. Yeah,
they don't give up big plays at all. Like not at all.
So yeah, Thielen's my dude. I mean, you got to pay for him, but I don't think he's really gonna be a popular guy this week.
Recency bias says he won't be, right? Yeah, and again, it was so weird. Like that game, it was Diggs caught the first pass of the half. Thielen caught the last half and the last play of the first half. They caught neither. No catches in between that in the first half. That was so weird. But that's just me tilting retroactively. What about you, Evan? Who do you have as far as a bounce back this week? Did we lose Evan?
I don't have any bounce backs. I just want to talk about Giovanni Bernard.
Okay.
Yeah. So the matchup is not, it's not that great. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not that great. I mean, he is a home favorite. There's really no one else on the roster that we have to worry about. I mean, he's set up for 20 plus touches. He's been, biding his time. I mean, he's got, if you like the fresh legs narrative, he's got fresh legs because they haven't been given the ball at all, not even as a receiver. And I mean, I think he's good. I think he's pretty good. And I think that he is a guy that, could handle 20 plus touches for, 3 or 4 games. I don't think he could do it for a career, but I think he could do it very effectively for 3 or 4 games. And we're going to get him in this 1 game sample. I don't expect Joe Mixon to play with a concussion on a short week. And so I want to talk about like his ownership, how should we treat him? Should we try to go overweight? I feel like Crane would say that he would go overweight on Giovanni Bernard, certainly on DraftKings.
It's 3.1K. It's above the minimum. That's ridiculous.
If Mixon is out, Gio will be owned on DraftKings more than Josh Gordon.
Yeah.
Like not even, it's not
he
even
should
like
be.
debate.
He should
be. Like I'm all about that chalk life, and I'm most likely again. This is my
31 at 31.
How do you not?
There's like
it's
no
a lock and load.
Like it's 20 touches on a guy that catches the ball. And like Evan said, like he's had points of his career where he's had spurts where he has been the feature guy, and he's been a good fantasy running back in those spurts. So I mean, over the course of a full season, like he said, it's not achievable, and he's not that type of archetype. But in those small samples, he's been fine, and he's been an RB1, and he has a ceiling as well. He has ceiling potential. He had 96 yards on 15 touches last week against a defense that had been, limiting, production to running backs. So, I mean, yeah, he's going to be like an auto smash if, lock in, mix.
Give me the argument. Give me the worst case scenario. Let's say he stays healthy. Okay, he doesn't score a touchdown. Like, give me like the worst case scenario. Like, what game script is he not playing in?
Well, this is if the Bears go to the Bengals, who maybe without Vontaze Burfict, and impose their will with the running game and just control the ball.
Yeah.
But the Bears have been one of the worst ball control teams in many games this year. Last week they had 37 offensive plays.
Dude,
they had another game, I think, where they had like under 40 offensive plays. I mean, they've been
2 games. Yeah.
They're trying to play like 1930s football. I mean, I'm serious. Like, it's like Jeff Fisher. It really is, man. And they're an embarrassment to the NFL. And Giovanni Bernard. The Bengals haven't been very good at controlling the ball either this year, but I think that they should in this game. And the Bengals really, or the Bears defensively, they've been on a steady downward slide. They've lost a lot of good players. Reeves mentioned Pernell McPhee. I mean, he's always banged up. But they also lost Leonard Floyd, another one of their best pass rushers. He's on injured reserve. My guess is that Pernell McPhee does not play this week. I mean, I think Dalton could have a good game. I think A.J. Green, you look at each of the last 5 number 1 receivers to face the Bears have all done real well, including Marquise Goodwin last week. So it's a great spot for A.J.
It's all dudes that aren't as good as A.J.
This is an uncommon opponent for Andy Dalton. I mean, the Bengals should get their offense revved up. And one thing you definitely noticed, and Reeves talked about it earlier, was that the Bears could not get pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo last week at their house. And now they're on the road. It's a very good spot, man, for the Bengals offense.
Hey, Rich, the Patriots are projected to score 29 points this week without Gronk. How are they going to get those 29 points?
They got Rex Burkhead, man. Like this.
That's it.
They're going to get there. Brady, the last 7 times he's thrown no touchdowns in a game, has come back and thrown 3 the following week, 3 or more. So I mean, I think he'll find a way to get there. And if Hogan plays, they're going to find a way to get there.
You got any takes, Evan, as far as the Patriots this week?
Yeah, I mean, the Hogan coming back, so they're playing on Monday night. So he practiced today, Wednesday. That bodes very well for him. He's right back in there. He's ready to go. I would be surprised. I'd be shocked if he doesn't play this week unless he has like a setback in practice. But I mean, they got him started early, and he's going to get the full practice weekend. He's going to be right back in there. With and without Gronk, Brady has some significant splits. I mean, it's like a 30-yard difference since Gronk entered the league. It's like 43%, 0.43 fewer touchdowns per game or something like that. So it is, if you just look at it from that standpoint, but I mean, Cooks can burn those Dolphins CBs. I mean, those dudes are slow. Xavier Howard was like a 4.6 dude coming out of college. Cordrea Tinkersley is like, he ran fast at the combine, but he's actually not a very good athlete. And then Hogan, I mean, Hogan missed like 4 or 5 games. He's still tied with Rob Gronkowski for most targets inside the 10 on the Patriots roster. So he can step right into that red zone role. In Monday through Thursday, I'm going to try to get as much Brady as I can, maybe playing him naked, maybe playing him with some Cooks. But I mean, he's super expensive. I don't think people are going to want to go up to him, especially without Gronk. But I think he can absolutely have the big day. I think the main concern, really, in addition to losing Gronk, is that the Patriots might like game plan specifically to try to just pound the Dolphins, because when they played a couple of weeks ago, the Dolphins couldn't stop Deion Lewis at all. And I don't think they could stop really, Rex Burkhead. They just lost William Hayes, who had been like maybe their best defensive end, certainly against the run. He's on IR now. So I think that they could specifically design a game plan to try to attack the Dolphins with the running game. But, what you really just want is red zone opportunities. And, Brady can, even if they have a great rushing day, Brady can still throw like 3 or 4 or so.
Rich, you have any like correlation plays that are kind of jumping out to you? Quarterback, receiver, however you want to do it?
No, I mean, the Bengals stack is obviously, you can go Bengals onslaught, I think. I mean, because of Gio's dual compartmentalization. I mean, you can play Bengals D, Gio, and AJ Green. I don't think there's any problem there because it's super concentrated, their touch distribution anyways. It was with Mixon and Green. So, I mean, you can play that. I kind of like the Matt Forte Jets correlation as well. If you want to play Jets D, I mean, the Broncos have just been giving up so many points to opposing defenses. I wish the Jets were at home, and I wish the Jets were good on defense as well. But I mean, the Dolphins weren't good, and they were a smash defense last week. So the Denver's awful. Like they've quit on the season. Like they're not even like trying. Like their team's not trying. They've had an 8-game losing streak. It's their longest as a franchise since 1967. They've been outscored by 133 points over that span, 48 more than the next closest team, the Browns. This is unequivocally the worst team in the NFL right now. They put Derek Wolfe on injured reserve. They can't stop the run. If opposing teams have led for 81% of their snaps since the Broncos bye week. It's the highest rate in the league. So game script's going to be in his favor. If you look at Forte too, he's only, I prefer this is a DK play only mostly. He's 4,300 on DK full PPR. He smashed that price, man. He's tripled up that price consistently. I mean, he's been an RB2 or better in 6 of his past 8 games. He's a nice roster freeing play. You might not have to use him because Gio's on the board, but I mean, I think people will just bypass him to get to Gio. I mean, you can play him and Gio together, I think, and be fine with the types of running backs that are off the board on the main slate. I think he's a really good play. Like I said, I mean, Denver is just, man, they've quit, man. It's Vance Joseph might get the Tom Sula treatment, man.
I fell for Demaryius Thomas. Was like, oh, he's too cheap. Manny Sanders is too cheap. I played both those guys. Are they just not play? Because they were just too cheap last week, and I know Sanders got hurt for a while too. Are they just not playable anymore? It's just we can't trust that offense to move the ball at all.
At this point, what you want Simeon to get benched at halftime for Osweiler, and Osweiler to come save the guys. I mean, Osweiler is the best option at this point. I mean, Simeon was train wreck last week. I mean, I think it was the worst quarterback performance all year. I mean, I really think it was. It was so freaking bad. Yeah, I mean, it was right there. It was right there.
Certainly on the Family Feud board. Does anybody have Eli Manning for a redemption game? Is that not happening? No redemption?
I don't think so. I mean, it's just passing yards post Odell, man, has just been so in the tanks. Like, I just don't see any way. And especially because the game script here is going to set up for the Cowboys to run it probably 35 times. It's really hard to say, man. Like, it's just hard to get invested in on the Eli train.
Evan, do you have a favorite? Oh, good.
Yeah, I kind of like Gabbert to Larry Fitz this week.
Ooh, yeah.
Titans have just been getting shelled by slot receivers.
You're losing more followers there, Evan.
Look at them all. Doug Baldwin had 10 for 105 and 1 against him. Jeremy Maclin had 8 for 98 against him. Brandon LaFell in a game where he played 75% of his snaps in the slot against the Titans had 6 for 95 and 1 against him. Alan Hearns had 6 for 82 and a touchdown against him. Braxton Miller last week at 71 yards against him. Jarvis Landry 5 for 44 and a touchdown against them, and they may be without Logan Ryan, who's primarily played slot corner for them due to a concussion this week. Larry Fitzgerald, of course, runs 65% of his routes in the slot. Titans have given up third most touchdowns in the league to wide receivers. Gabbert is cheap. He has been a top 14 fantasy quarterback in 2 of his 3 starts. He was not against the Rams last week. I think that was fairly predictable. The Titans are 25th in pass defense DVOA. 2 of their last 3 quarterbacks they've gone up against have been top 10 fantasy quarterbacks, including Tom Savage last week. The Titans have given up the 7th most touchdown passes overall in the league. And, I mean, I like Blaine Gabbert against defenses that can't rush the passer because he's an overreactive guy to pressure. And the Titans they're just very middling in terms of their pass rush metrics. So I think that Gabbert, as a relatively cheap stack to Larry Fitzgerald, and I mean, I like Larry Fitzgerald just on his own, but, as a low-owned, cheap quarterback, you probably need him to run for one because he's not going to throw touchdown passes to those outside receivers in all likelihood. The Titans have been very good, actually, at limiting big plays this year, and I don't think that he just doesn't really have a connection with the little dudes that run around on the outside for the Cardinals. It's a Larry Fitzgerald thing. It's a Seals Jones thing too, by the way. I mean,
is he a thing? RSJ? He's
got 5+ targets in 3 straight games. I mean, we can look at his snap count and we can look at his route runs and his routes run and be like, he's a donkey play, but he's getting targets. And if he plays 40% of the snaps and runs 18 routes this week, he could get 9 targets. And, the Titans have been terrible against tight ends for like the last month and a half. So
yeah, I mean,
think
when you look at when you
ahead.
talk about the snaps, I mean, one thing we always have to remember when we have these guys that, compartmentalize and like early down runners are the same way. If you look at like early down runners and you say like, site snap counts, like Alex Collins or something. But when these guys are coming in the games, they're having specific plays called for them. And that's what Ricky Seals-Jones has been. They've got this package of plays that they have for him. And he's come in, he's only running, a dozen routes a game, but he, like Evan said, he's getting targeted on 55% of his routes. Like for the full season, like high tight end is like high 28%. Like so it's double. So they have a specific package every week. They come in with Ricky Seals-Jones, and when he comes in, like he's one of the primary reads on the play.
Evan, I was told we can't play Old Man this week, and this late into the season. We can still play Fitzgerald?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he's been hot.
He keeps chugging along, man. He's awesome.
He's unbelievable. I mean, I thought the dream might have been dead when Palmer got hurt, and I was like, please bring in Gabbert, but he was good in the one start with Stanton, and he's been great with Gabbert, with the exception of the game against like the Jaguars thought enough of him to shadow him with Jalen Ramsey. I mean, he's balling, dude. I think he's like a top 5 fantasy receiver on the season. He might be even like top 3
past 4.
Yeah, so he's awesome. He's great.
And the other thing is Gabbert can only throw to him. So Gabbert has a 79% completion percentage targeting Larry Fitzgerald and 53% everywhere else.
That's perfect because that's the exact kind of player that Blaine Gabbert is.
I like Gabbert more than Garoppolo, the dude we talked about earlier.
Ooh, I like that.
You've been sold. Look at that. They're both. I mean, it seems like it's always fun to punt the quarterback on DK and have some fun, some stacking and loading up some studs. 2 things before we step aside and get out of here. We're up against the clock. We haven't given like one take from the Philadelphia Rams game. Any takes, Evan?
Trey Burton is the guy to talk about, I think. The Rams have been very good against tight ends. But if Ertz doesn't play, and he's technically on a short week because they played Sunday night, but if Ertz does not play, then Trey Burton comes in squarely into play. I mean, when Ertz was out with a hamstring against Denver, Trey Burton delivered. And then last week, Trey Burton saw 7 targets. So the matchup is not good. Again, the Rams they're built to play well against tight ends because they're very athletic at inside linebacker, solid at safety. But Trey Burton, just as an opportunity-based guy, in a passing offense that's humming, I think that he comes squarely into play. And the same with Nelson Aguilar. Nelson Aguilar played season high in 88% of the snaps last week, ran like almost 50 routes, 12 targets. I mean, he had season highs across the board, and he becomes the primary middle of the field receiver, I think, for Carson Wentz against the Rams, who, I mean, we've seen them give up big games to slot receivers as well, Thielen, and then, of course, Larry Fitz last week. So those would be my 2 takes, I think, from that game.
It's going to be a week part 2, potentially. The sequel was rarely as good as the original. Remember the first time it happened, it was a scramble that Sunday morning when Ertz was a late scratch. You got anybody else for the road before? I have a dilemma, so you go ahead and tell me, Rich. How is this handled? I'm going to the Jacksonville game this weekend, Seattle at Jacksonville. The rules of DFS, they clearly state if you're going to the game, you have to stack it, you have to play it, you got to play it this way and that way, play one side. But I don't want to play anybody in this game. What do I do?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting game. I don't think on paper there's a lot of like great individual plays. And like Evan brought up, I mean, the Jaguars thought highly enough of Larry Fitzgerald, to put Jalen Ramsey in the slot. That could be something we see again, with Doug Baldwin. I mean, Tyler Lockett and Paul Richardson are guys that they can play one-on-one with. I think that they'll feel comfortable with it. Obviously the hot topic is, Russell Wilson and the Jags defense. We can make like strength of schedule arguments for both of these teams. Russell Wilson, his opponents have been bad. The Jaguars defense have faced a lot of, really bad quarterbacks, but inherently we know both these guys, both Russell Wilson is good at football and the Jags defense is very good at football. So it's, very intriguing. I do say I'm a little concerned because the way Russell Wilson has scored his fantasy points is he has had a lot of like short passing touchdowns that have really inflated his totals because the Seattle can't run. I mean, Russell Wilson leads the league in fantasy points scored inside the 10-yard line and the 5-yard line. The opponents against the Jaguars have run the fewest plays inside the 10 and 5-yard line in the NFL. They only 18 plays total have come against the Jaguars inside the 10-yard line. Only five all season out of 12 games so far. And NFL teams have run 5 plays inside the 5-yard line against the Jaguars. Like, that's pretty silly, to think about. Maybe there's some regression, and Wilson, hits him up there, but it's going to be one of these games where I think it's going to be fairly low scoring. I mean, I saw Vegas came in with like an 18-point total for Seattle. It's a game where I don't think there's a lot of like trustworthy plays, but like some ancillary guys, I think I'd be okay still using like a seasonal league. But as far as DFS, man, it's almost full contrarian unless you're like trying to punt with Mike Davis.
This is what you do, Dean.
Okay, fire away. Tell me what to do.
Okay. You use Russell Wilson and the Jaguars defense.
Oh, wow.
So what you're hoping for, you start the game off with Jaguars get a pick 6. Okay?
Sure.
Put the Seahawks in a hole. You're already celebrating. Over the course of the game, Jaguars get 7 sacks. Okay. However, Russell Wilson ends up running for 2 and throwing for 2. The touchdowns go to Luke Wilson and Tanner McAvoy. And you get 19 points out of your defense and 34 out of Russell Wilson, and you just put all the best plays. Like, you could just use chalk in every single other spot in your lineup, but that you're incredibly differentiated from the crowd with just those 2 plays. No one will have that.
I mean, I'm not going to play Tanner McAvoy, but I'm going
to. No. Just play Russell Wilson and the Jaguars defense.
I'll do that. That's definitely going to happen. I'll make it happen. We'll see how it works out this week. All right, we are up against the clock. We definitely have to get out of here and step aside. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to enter into your show. Hopefully things are going to Crane will be back next week. There's no issues. For Rich Rebar, for Evan Silva, both of RotoWorld, I'm Dean. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your football. Good luck this week. We're out of here. Holler.